Hello again. I haven't been on this camera in a while, so it feels a little bit weird, but... So, this episode's going to be a little bit strange. It's going to be mostly explanation to kind of what is going on. There's almost no text for the most part throughout this next section that I'm going to show. So, most of it is going to be my interpretation of what's kind of going on and the meanings behind stuff that is happening within the game at that specific time. What I'm going to be talking about is not the entire last section of the game, but just a important aspect of that last section of the game. Not specifically about the creature, the character, the entity Gygus. That's going to be the episode after this one. But this one is going to be specifically talking about the phase distorter, or in Japan, the space tunnel, and basically the things that can be interpreted from this method that is used to go through time, or in the game's case, go through time and confront Gygus in his, this pocket of time that he's in. First things first, I guess, is, so what happened previous to this episode was the whole Magic Hand thing. And a few things happen after this, where after Ness gets out of Magic Hand, or out of his Magic Hand and everything, they go to Saturn Valley. You are then told by Dr.Andonuts to go back to your basically your hometown, Onet, and get this thing that he needs, this piece of meteorite from the meteor that, cycling back to where you started, get a piece from this meteor, and the whole town is infested with, and been shut down, whatever, everybody's hiding from the Gygus' forces, these, difficult enemies and such. So it's a simple section. End of the day, you go and get the piece of meteorite, go back to Saturn Valley, you give it to Dr. Andonuts, and then after you take a rest, they're able to finish this phase distorter with the help of the Apple Kid and especially the Mr.Saturns. And yeah, and then basically after that, this is when it starts. So not really too much happens from the last section. Like, it's a very quick time frame where all this stuff occurs. That's one could say that, like, it feels like they almost were kind of rushed to court, but it's kind of a good thing in a way. There's a sense of urgency. So I'm going to show you some gameplay as usual, so you can try and make your own interpretations. It's a little bit weird because, like I said, there's like not much text to see, and it kind of skips around here and there, but maybe it'll help you to get a little bit of context. I will also skip past the entire Gygus fight, even though the last part I will show is after you fight him, which is like basically the very end of the game sort of thing, but it's important to the point I'm trying to make, involving this phase distorter, the traveling through time and the aspects of that. So yeah, anyway, I will show you that clip, and then I will get back and do my normal interpretations as usual. See you then. Okay, so first what happens is that you get the meteorite fragment, whatever the material is, and then they're able to quickly complete the phase distorter number 2, and then you travel to this place called the Lost Underworld, which is a really weird, abstract, strange place, alien place. You could actually get to this place from the area with the dinosaurs, I guess as a kind of foreshadowing kind of deal. It's one of those little islands over here. You can just kind of see what this place is. So that's kind of interesting foreshadowing to coming here. But you get here, and then pretty much as soon as you get here and you look around a bit, Dr.Andonuts and Applecade and another Mr.Saturn, they come with a... So Dr.Andonuts, Applecade, and the Mr.Saturn quickly come to the same area with the somehow just basically instantaneously made it seems phase distorter 3. Well, first the thing I was going to talk about was the phase distorter itself being something that is able to travel instantaneously through points in time, through time, and just like points in general or something around that, basically kind of time machine deal. Now, in Japan, the literal translation of the thing is called the space tunnel, which to me doesn't really speak too much, but what they named it in English, the phase distorter, that is kind of interesting to me, just because when I think of phase, I think of wave, kind of like with, in electronics, they have different phases, like, phase shifts, they would call them, as well as when you have, one alternating current, signal going with, like, slightly different lag or whatever, they have, like, a phase shift. And basically any kind of deal with, in the bullshit physics, whatever, waves and such like that, they would call it as some kind of phase. And now, since I started to look at this place and the energy that goes through it, it made me instantly think of that kind of like, maybe time is, well, whatever we perceive time as, whatever thing we've constructed time to be, is actually some kind of just another form of the energy that makes up this place with the waves. The phase distorter is potentially not so much traveling through quote unquote time, but it is maybe more so distorting or changing the phase of whatever wave energy is going through this place and traveling through that sort of thing. Like, that's just kind of what I'm thinking of when I hear phase distorter. Just a very interestingly named, considering all things considered. Like, that really does make me think of that kind of idea of this place being made out of energy, some kind of waves, and being able to travel through quote unquote time is more so a thing of changing the phase of that energy going through this place. So, yeah, just interesting note about the actual device, the phase distorter there. So, one of the most interesting things about this entire end part of the game, or this entire sequence of traveling through time and going to fight Gygas in the past, is how the process that happens before you actually travel at all, and at least the reasoning that Dr. Andonuts gives on what he has to do to actually have you travel through using this phase distorter, have you travel using this device. Unfortunately, I could not, the person who made that really good translation, personal literal translation from the Japanese to the English, for this game, where they did their own research and everything, that Tomato, is on this part, they didn't. I probably should have emailed them and tried to ask them, like, what was said here in Japanese, because for all I know, what Dr. Andonuts says here could be, I don't know, completely different to what is said in English. But either way, unfortunately, I don't know that yet, but maybe I'll eventually learn it. But now is what happens in English is he basically says Ness and his friends cannot use the Phase Distorter 3 to travel back in the past to fight Gygas because they have, I guess you could say, organic bodies, and anything that goes through the teleportation travel process through that Phase Distorter, life is eliminated, destroyed, or whatever. So what he offers or says you will have to do to use the Phase Distorter in this way is to basically transfer their consciousness or something around there to robot bodies, inorganic bodies, and send those in the past to fight Gygas. Now, at first, this was really confusing to me because I was like, wait a minute, how, if he's transferring, because for me, initially I thought, and the way that the procedure or whatever goes on here, it kind of, to me, it almost suggested he was doing some kind of brain surgery, like taking out their brains and putting them into robots, sort of thing. But then it would be a complete plot hole that wouldn't make any sense, is that he says all organic life gets destroyed in the process. So yeah, your brain is kind of organic. So this made me go down the thought process of, wait, and he even says it, like, he's sending something completely different through this process. He's doing something completely different. At least from what he's saying, it can't be anything organic. So whatever procedure he's doing, and he says he will transfer their brain program. He even says in quotes, program, and doing that, transferring that program will have their soul. He basically says, he says their spirit or their soul will go with the robot during that transfer process or something. Like, to me, this was just like a crazy, like, whoa, this is like crazy to me what was being said here for what we kind of talk about with the spirit communicating with the body from a remote location sort of thing. Like, there is a disconnect in some way between the body and the soul, obviously. It's not like they're both one and the same, or I guess. Or at least in this case, it is saying that the spirit is... well, see, it's kind of weird. But to me, it would say that the spirit is somewhere remote, the soul is somewhere remote, the true self is somewhere remote, and communicating with the avatar, the body, whatever, and is able to interface with it that way. Like, controlling it like you would a video game character, like an avatar in a video game world, like you do when you have a game controller and you were controlling a character in a virtual world. You were doing that. That is what is making me think this. It's almost like, to me, it's almost completely saying that obviously, like, bluntly, like, yeah, that's what's happening. Basically, him transferring this program, whatever he is suggesting, to the robots, to these robot bodies, then is able to have the spirit remotely, instead of talking to their original organic bodies, they are now communicating, interfacing with these different robot avatar bodies. But he warns that he is not sure, basically, he's not certain if this process, after the entire ordeal of fighting Gygas, defeating him and such, he's not sure if their spirits or their souls will go back or return to their original bodies afterward, after their robot bodies are destroyed or stuck there, whatever happens. Yeah, like that is, I feel like I'm not doing a great job at explaining this as I kind of wanted, but hopefully whoever's listening would kind of get the idea of what I'm saying, is that this is like 100% saying that there's something inorganic in some way within our person, or there's some process that, at least in this example in this game, he is using to transfer the control of what the spirit or the true self is interfacing with, controlling, and transfer it to another avatar, another body in some way. And at least from what he said, it destroys life. So it couldn't have been something from the brain. It couldn't have been something from the physical meat brain, like, the medulla oblongata or something like that, the thalamus. He's not taking something organic out, but he is transferring something from them or some process that is able to allow them to interface with a different body, their spirit to interface with a different body in this way. And it kind of sucks that I have to skip so far ahead of the events or whatever, but I have to skip past the Gygas fight and all that, and the entire Lost Underworld wherever they are. Basically, what I was saying with the spirit thing is that they go through the phase distorter, they go through time, they still have all of their abilities, all of their everything, all of their statistics and everything. They some can say that this is like it's just a plot hole limitation, whatever, but they have, for all intents and purposes, they are now embodying these robot bodies completely the same as they were in their human bodies in a way, they look different. But after the defeat of Gygas, whatever happens, I'll show that later in the next episode, but their bodies, these robot bodies, are destroyed or whatever, they're broken, and what happens shortly after is you see these orbs, whatever, these things of light, which are to represent, I would only guess, their spirit or their soul, maybe literally traveling, or I think probably more, at least what I would be thinking, they are transferring their control, or they're transferring their interfacing of their higher self is now going back to the original bodies, which Dr. Andonuts wasn't sure if this would, he wasn't certain if this would be the case or anything. Like, of course he wouldn't know. He's just doing this thing to transfer their souls interfacing to a different body. He doesn't know if they'll be able to come back without any kind of assistance. But in this case, they do. I mean, to me, that just says so many things, because that is saying that especially one, is that the time thing really doesn't matter that much. Like, time being an illusion is even more what I originally considered. It's even more of an illusion, I guess. Like, their souls are able to transfer control or be hooked up, interfaced to another avatar, to their original and these robot avatars, basically at will, without any care of the fact, like, because they originally used this machine, the phase distorter, to travel back, but somehow their souls are able to interface again with their original bodies, transfer back through this time. So what does that say? That time really doesn't exist, or it is completely fluid? Is that your soul and everything, your avatar or whatever, all control is able to be, all energy is able to travel through time at will without any real hindrance, basically, here. Like, they, with no outside assistance or whatever you want to say, like outside forces doing anything, their souls, their spirits are able to, at will, transfer their control to another avatar at will, because their robot bodies were destroyed, and then basically went right back to their original bodies afterwards. Like, what does that say? To me, that says quite a lot. And on that same pretty big topic, I would say, is that one, like I was saying before with he's saying that they can't put any organic matter into there, it'll be destroyed. So people might say that something like the pineal gland or something is the antenna for our spiritual selves to commune or communicate with the avatar with the physical body. But at least in this case, I would say clearly maybe really not, or maybe it does in some way, I don't know. But at least in what this is saying, what this game is making me interpret is that the pineal gland is not necessary, is not the actual originator, the original antenna, or whatever you want to say, of the spiritual communication. It is like, potentially, it was actually kind of funny, actually. I had to, my internet was having problems today, and I had to mess with the router, and it was something wrong with, I needed to reset the WPS or whatever settings. And, it has a dynamic IP and everything, which is like most routers. But that made me think, like, so at least from this example, is from what I'm interpreting from this and what this, I think it's saying, is that, so if the pineal gland is a physical thing, but if the pineal gland is not the antenna that the spirit actually directly communicates through, or is the thing that is required for it to do that, then what is? And, it could be anything. And I'm thinking, like, maybe when we talk about the frequency and tuning our dial and stuff like that to a different frequency, to be on a different wavelength and everything, to take up different wavelengths and frequencies that are out there, energies, just like a radio would, is that maybe it's not so much the physical part of the body, but something else, like sort of like every electronic device or whatever kind of has a unique sort of IP address assigned to it, which that allows it to basically say, like, this is a unique device sort of thing to communicate with. And it's like, maybe that's how these bodies work, or whatever. Maybe that's how these avatars work, is that, like, there's some kind of unique, I don't know, what the DNA is. There's some kind of unique address or IP address or something that allows the spirit to communicate with it at a certain frequency that makes it so it can interface directly with it. And that's what allows it to interface with it directly, as we do. And maybe that's what Dr. Andonuts kind of did with the robot bodies, is that he put that same IP address or something into the robot bodies, into the robot material, whatever, and that is what allowed them to transfer between these bodies. And then, as soon as the robots disconnected or whatever, got disconnected from the network, they went right back to the physical human bodies that they originally had with the IP addresses, whatever. So, I don't know, it sounds ridiculous, but, like, hey, maybe when we are brought here or we're assigned here, we're almost given when we pick a body or whatever happens when we're put into a body, we're given some kind of unique address, and that's the frequency that we are at. Our spirit communicates at energy-wise, puts out energy-wise to communicate remotely with that body, with that avatar. Sounds completely absurd, but I don't know. This is really, really interesting thing that this game brought up to me, that I was just like, that really does speak to me in some ways. And one more thing on that is, I just thought maybe that whole operation procedure thing, because when they come back to their bodies, it doesn't seem like I know it's just sprites, so, what can you really show with that? But maybe that whole procedure wasn't even, like, that invasive per se. Like, maybe it was something just as simple as him extracting something from them, or reading something from their body, their physical body, that he can imprint on the robot body to allow it to communicate with the spirit or whatever, interface with the spirit. Just another interesting thing. Alright, so the last thing I wanted to talk about on this specific part of the game aspect that I'm talking about here in the same vein is, if we're going by that assumption that he's transferring the control mechanism or whatever of which the spirit of these beings, these characters, they can communicate with this avatar, is one, when they go to these robot bodies, all their statistics, all their everything, all their abilities, that's the important part, are still intact. So basically the entire game has had every character using this quote-unquote magic, which in the game it is called, in Japan it is referenced to as PK. It's called PK, which would stand for psychokinetic. But in English, they called it PSI, which is basically the same thing, psionics. Psionics. Exact same thing, basically. Which, by some definitions, I don't know exactly what definitions, at least mine, by what I would think of when I immediately hear that word, would be something, like in The Matrix, when Neo talks to that kid or whatever, and he bends the spoon with his mind, or whatever. He bends the spoon without touching it. Psionics would be like these powers, these energies that you can transmit with your mind or your brain. I don't really want to get into the brain there, or maybe I'm going to kind of try and disagree with that definition of the brain, but more so the mind or something else, even the spirit. Almost every character, every ability in this game basically has kind of a psionic thing attached to it, which is kind of interesting. Like some enemies, it's like, why would that thing be able to use psionics or something? But, I'll just say most of the characters that do it are either aliens, humans, some weird, like, eldritch creature kind of deals. Basically, like, kind of conscious beings, I guess. Like, maybe, I think even plants use it in the game, so maybe, I don't know. But they're mobile plants, so maybe that even gives more credence that it's not the brain itself, but something else. What I'm trying to say is basically, from the fact that they get this transferred, they're not, at least I think it's been made clear, there's been no brain transfer at all, no organic transfer at all from the body, the physical body, to the robot body. Then, at least if one wanted to call it psionics by the definition of the brain or the mind, is then why are they able to use any of their psionic powers then? Because they're able to use all their abilities in these new robot bodies. So, what's going on there? How are they doing this? What is this psionic power actually that they're using? And I would say, unless the definition of psionics has changed completely, I would say it is something completely different, like what one would say is some kind of magic. But I'm suggesting maybe it's more so something coming from the soul, or some kind of, like, energy power coming from your spirit, your soul directly in some way, even transferring it, like, remotely. And maybe something like, no, because it can't be, now I think about it. Maybe there is some kind of antenna, but that is able to amplify that power somehow, and then actually put some kind of impact on the physical world that avatar is currently inhabiting or something. Yeah, basically I'm saying, like, the fact that their robot bodies are able to use all of these powers, to me, suggest that there is nothing involving the brain at all, the quote-unquote meat physical brain at all, with these psionic powers and abilities, is that it is something probably completely different and maybe completely foreign or not local at all to the actual body avatar itself, but more just a direct influence, maybe a direct influence or energy emitted from the spirit of whatever is inhabiting that avatar, whatever's interfacing with it. Like, I would say it would be more accurate to say it's some kind of magic, soul power, spirit energy than psionics by the definition of the brain or the mind. Or, you could say it's something emitted from the consciousness in some way. Just like we say we have a direct influence on things that happen in this world with our beliefs, and maybe that's the same way. We're sending out some kind of, like, energy in a way. Maybe not in that regard knowingly or purposely, but it just sort of happens. And in this case, with the psionics, it is more of a knowing, purposeful emitting of that energy to do something, such as do a fire, like, snap your fingers and fire is created, or whatever the things are happening, make a shield, a psionic, or a power shield, or whatever around you. But yeah, not a great way to explain it, I guess, but I think I got my point across there. So, yeah, well, looking at the recording time, I actually was able to say some of the stuff a lot more concisely, even though I did ramble on a bit and repeat, but I'm surprised at how well I think that went, trying to get out, because this was a lot of stuff I wanted to get out, and a lot of pretty, I would say, like, esoteric topic kind of thing. Like, this is not something I would normally ever be able to talk about with someone, and they would ever have any clue what I'm trying to get at. But, yeah, this is what happens before you fight Gygas. I think it says an immense amount of stuff. If not some of, even outside of Magican, I would say this might be the second runner-up to crazy things that is suggested from this game that has spoken to me and given me some kind of idea of, like, maybe this is how it works, or maybe this is how it works for me. I don't know how I've been making it work this way, or something because of that, but it really says a lot to me almost without any words. What happens in this? It is all just kind of happening without almost anything being said. I'm just interpreting it purely from what I feel. Really, yeah, like I said, it said a lot more than I could have ever expected when I originally played the game. But yeah, that's my interpretation of this entire little section here. The next video will be specifically about the Gygas, your encounter with him, and the entity itself, and what weird things can be interpreted from it. But as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.